I was 32 years old when I discovered that my colleague had been passing off my life story as her own for the past 3 years. The realization came during a non-profit leadership conference where Amanda Chun, a woman I'd worked with for years, was giving the keynote speech. She stood confidently on stage, talking about resilience, authenticity, and overcoming hardship. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. When I was 16, my mother died in a car accident, and I had to leave school to care for my younger siblings. That was my story. My exact story. As she continued describing working at a gas station, cleaning offices at night, and struggling through college while supporting family, I realized she wasn't inspired by my experiences. She had copied them completely and built her professional identity around my pain. I sat frozen in the auditorium while Amanda continued, telling deeply personal details that belonged to me. She repeated stories I had shared during late-night work sessions when I believed we were becoming genuine friends. She even described my fear of using a college library computer system because I had never learned how. The audience listened with admiration while she delivered my memories with polished confidence. I slipped out before the speech ended and sat in my car shaking. When I searched her name online, I found dozens of speeches and interviews built around the same fabricated background. In one podcast, she even described my father's alcoholism and our family's financial struggles as if they were her own experiences. Amanda had become successful and respected by transforming my private trauma into her public brand, while I remained invisible behind the scenes. When I confronted Amanda at work, she acted as if nothing was wrong. She claimed we simply shared similar experiences and insisted she had been inspired by my story. But I knew the truth. Her mother was alive. She had attended private school, and she had never struggled the way I had. I finally realized that staying silent only allowed her to keep profiting from my life. So, I began sharing my own story publicly, through a blog post, and later at conferences. I was nervous and imperfect on stage, but the words were real because they belonged to me. People connected with that honesty in a way they never could with Amanda's rehearsed performances. Eventually, she stopped giving speeches about hardship and returned to topics she genuinely understood. For the first time, I understood that my story deserved to be told in my own voice, not borrowed by someone else. The week after the conference, I couldn't stop replaying Amanda's speech in my mind. Every sentence felt like another theft I hadn't noticed before. I remembered all the evenings we spent together after work, ordering takeout while finishing grant proposals, talking about family, fear, and survival. I had trusted her with memories I rarely shared with anyone. The more I thought about it, the more disturbed I became. Amanda hadn't just borrowed a few details for inspiration, she had memorized entire pieces of my life. I started collecting evidence, saving videos, interviews, and articles where she repeated my experiences almost word for word before meeting me. Her talks focused on leadership strategy and organizational management. After we became close co-workers, her entire identity shifted into the role of a survivor overcoming hardship. Seeing the timeline laid out clearly made me realize this wasn't accidental. One night, I called my best friend Sarah and explained everything. At first, she thought it had to be some strange misunderstanding. But once I described the exact phrases Amanda used, Sarah went silent. "That's not inspiration," she finally said. "That's theft." Hearing someone else confirm what I already knew made the situation feel painfully real. Sarah asked me why I had never shared my own story publicly before. The answer was simple: fear. I had always believed people like Amanda were better suited for stages and microphones. She was smooth, confident, and commanding, while I stumbled over words and hated attention. But maybe authenticity mattered more than perfection. Maybe people needed to hear stories from the people who actually lived them, not from someone skilled at performing emotion. That conversation planted the first small seed of courage inside me. I decided to reclaim my story slowly. I wrote a LinkedIn post about being a first-generation college student and surviving family hardship after losing my mother. I included details Amanda had been using in her speeches because they were mine to tell. The response overwhelmed me. Former classmates, co-workers, and nonprofit professionals sent messages saying they had no idea about my background and admired my resilience. Then came the comments comparing my experiences to Amanda's speeches. Instead of avoiding the truth, I answered honestly. I explained that Amanda and I worked together, and that these were experiences I had privately shared with her. Years earlier, within days, word spread through our professional network. Conference organizers began reaching out to me directly, asking if I would consider speaking publicly. For the first time, people wanted to hear my voice instead of Amanda's polished version of it. Amanda confronted me after a team meeting once our coworkers had left the room. She looked tense, but still tried to sound calm. "I saw your post," she said carefully. I told her that I was finally sharing my own story publicly. Amanda insisted she never meant to hurt me and claimed that working closely with me had caused our experiences to blur together in her mind. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your mother is alive," I reminded her. "You didn't grow up hungry. You didn't leave school to raise siblings." She avoided eye contact and quietly admitted she might have crossed a line. But it wasn't just a line. It was my life. I told her she needed to stop using my trauma as a professional tool. If she continued, I would keep telling the truth publicly and let people judge her actions for themselves. 6 months later, I stood backstage preparing to give my first keynote speech at regional nonprofit conference. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my notes. I wasn't polished like Amanda, and I knew I never would be. But when I walked onto the stage and began speaking, something changed. I stopped trying to sound impressive and simply told the truth. I spoke about grief, fear, poverty, and the loneliness of feeling out of place in college. Sometimes my voice cracked, and sometimes I lost my place, but the audience listened closely because they could feel the honesty behind every word. Afterward, a young woman approached me in tears and thanked me for making her feel less alone as a first-generation student. In that moment, I realized authenticity wasn't about perfect delivery. It was about speaking from lived experience instead of borrowed pain. Amanda eventually stopped giving speeches about overcoming hardship and returned to topics related to management and organizational strategy. We still work together, but the friendship we once seemed to have is gone completely. Our conversations are polite, distant, and carefully professional. Sometimes I wonder whether Amanda truly believed she had done nothing wrong, or whether she simply convinced herself that success justified the lie. Either way, I no longer waste energy trying to understand her motives. What matters is the lesson I learned from the experience. My story belongs to me, not just the facts, but the emotions, struggles, and meaning attached to them. No one else has the right to reshape my pain into something profitable for themselves. For years, I stayed silent because I thought my voice wasn't strong enough. Now I know that authenticity carries its own power, especially when it comes directly from the person who lived it. Sometimes I think back to the moment in that conference auditorium when I first heard Amanda telling my story as if it belonged to her. At the time, I felt powerless, almost erased. erased, like my life had somehow become more valuable in someone else's voice than in my own. But looking back now, I realize the experience forced me to confront something I had avoided for years. I had spent so much of my life surviving that I never stopped to believe my experiences mattered beyond survival itself. Amanda understood the power of my story before I did. She saw that people connected deeply to honesty, struggle, and resilience. The difference was that she treated those experiences like material for a performance, while I had lived every painful moment of them. After I began speaking publicly, I discovered something unexpected. Audiences did not care that I stumbled over words or paused when emotions caught up with me. They responded because they could feel the truth behind what I was saying. People approached me after conferences to share stories about grief, poverty, addiction, and feeling invisible in spaces where they believed they did not belong. Some told me they had never heard someone describe those experiences without trying to sound polished or inspirational. For the first time, I understood that vulnerability was not weakness, it was connection. The imperfections in my voice carried more weight than any rehearsed performance ever could. Amanda and I rarely speak now beyond necessary work conversations, and in many ways, that distance has been a relief. The trust we once had can never truly return, but I also no longer carry the anger the way I once did. Holding on to bitterness would only keep me trapped inside the same pain I fought so hard to reclaim. What matters more is that I finally stopped hiding behind the fear that my voice was not good enough. My story is not because it is dramatic or inspiring, but because I lived it. Every sacrifice, every humiliation, every moment of survival belongs to me. And now, when I tell it, I do so in my own voice, in my own imperfect way, without apology. My story belongs to me, not just the facts of what happened, but the meaning I make from those experiences, the way I choose to share them, and the connections I build through honest disclosure. No one else gets to borrow my pain for their professional advancement. No one else gets to polish my trauma into a keynote address. My story is mine to tell, in my own voice, in my own time, for my own purposes. And finally, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Some stories are felt, not spoken. If unsaid stories moved you even a little, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps these unsaid stories find their voice